All right, and I'm back. Welcome, and here we go. Welcome everybody to our final episode of Fantasy Romance February, our live interview. Today we have Kat, or tonight we have Kat Turner. Kat is when she's not reading or writing, she works for a university, teaches yoga, and lives the mom life. Her book is, she's the author of Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. It's book one in the Coven Daughters Paranormal Romance series. Hex won first place in the Fool of Love category. And she has another series starting up pretty soon called The Jungle Shifters Story. First book is called Under Your Skin. Welcome, Kat. I just want to really quick remind everybody that's on Facebook Live. Just write your comments in the comments section there, and I'll relay them to Kat. And everybody who is comes up on Zoom, just keep your microphones and your video off so that there's no confusion. Again, welcome, Kat. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me.
So we're going to have to cut this short because you do have another obligation at around 8 o'clock or so. So we'll go for an hour. So let's get right into this. According to your bio on your website, you have too many plants. How many plants do you have?
I think at last count it was 6, which is kind of ridiculous. Like, it's all subjective and it's all relative, right? So for some that might be considered few. For us, it's been quite an endeavor taking on that additional level of responsibility. But they do really brighten up the home, and I appreciate them. And I'm happy to say they're all still alive. So in case anybody was worried, they're doing great. And I just watered them tonight. So
good.
I'm ready for my medal.
Are they like big spider plants or tree type things, or smaller?
They're one of them is a cactus, so it's succulent. So that gives you just kind of an idea of my green thumb level there. Yeah, I'm very proud that I kept the succulent alive. And there's 3 snake plants actually, and one of them's a fern, and one of them's an English ivy. So those last 2 are kind of delicate, but we've got a pretty good routine going with a spray bottle and whatnot. They did succumb to a mite infection, but we managed to clear it up, and they're thriving. So we've been on a journey with these plants.
That's great. Now your bio as well. That's gym time is a good big part of your life, and you are quite adept at picking up objects with your toes. What kind of objects can you pick up?
Like really anything that's on the floor. Receipts, onion peels. I keep a running tally in my mind, pennies, any loose change. Just whatever's there. I will go toe to toe with it, pun intended, and typically prevail.
All right, really, very good. All right, so Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. Love the title. I love the cover too. It is available in our store and through our website as well. Yes, it's beautiful, very colorful.
Oh, yes, it is. I love it. The City Owl team is just awesome. So if anybody from the City Owl staff is watching, I just love you all so much. And the cover designer they rocked it, so to speak.
And we'll definitely get into talking about them later because we do have another author who has gone through City Owl Press. That we have in the store. So Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll, with the business skidding toward bankruptcy and bone dry bank account, Helen Schrader is willing to do the unthinkable. But what will happen when she hires a witch to cast a money spell? So we got witches and hexes and spells, and so go ahead, talk about your book.
Yeah, the summary I think really hits on some of the points. So we have Helen. She's the main character. She's very much down on her luck and desperate. She has some latent psychic gifts and magical abilities, but not really close enough to the surface where she thinks they're worth anything. She really needs to find her confidence in this story. So she goes to a local witch that's been recommended to her by some local folks in the pagan magic community. And she really has kind of an inspired moment with this person, who then awakens her to her own latent gifts, gives her some tips and strategies to rescue her business. But things go wildly wrong, and she ends up putting a hex on Brian, who's the love interest, through a series of somewhat comedic errors. And then in the course of trying to save her business, she has to also save his life, and various hijinks and some romance ensues after that. So kind of the premise, like the little kernel I was starting with the story was there's a lot of stories out there where the magical person is, very powerful, very gifted, the most adept in the land. And those are really fun stories. But I wanted to turn that on its head and start with the premise of what if the magical person in the story started out as the most incompetent magic user in the land, and how would the events unfold from there. So I just had a blast writing it. It was a very inspired experience, and I'm just thrilled when people love it and when it gets some attention and gets looked at.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to get the pages turning on it. Now, you also have a dark magic cult with an unquenchable thirst for power that closes in on them. How dark?
Yes. It's pretty dark. There is some sacrifice involved and some rituals. The cult is definitely tearing with the dark side because, once Helen gets involved with magic, she stirs up some forces that are beyond her control, that are somewhat demonic in nature. So this dark cult is also attempting to harness those forces for their own personal gain. And while Brian, being in Hollywood, he's all tangentially connected to the dark mojo out there. So it gets pretty spooky. It gets a little crazy with some demonic energies and some cultists who are really trying to get control of those demonic energies to enrich themselves. So yeah, it takes some dark turns, but then it turns around after that, we'll just say.
Well, you liken the book to or people who are a fan of Darynda Jones, Marie Moning, K.F. Breene, and also Laurel K Hamilton. Now, I've gone this whole month just about every interview mentioning Laurel K Hamilton because her Anita Blake series I just loved.
Yeah.
At least the first 8 or 9, and then they kind of went off the rails a little bit because I loved the mystery, the paranormal aspect to it. The heat aspect got a little much for me in those ones, and that's kind of where it seemed the focus was to be. But you talk about rituals and dark magic cults and stuff. It reminded me of one of her books where there was a cult of weird animals that did
Mm-hmm.
the what do you call them? The real life slasher films. There's a name for it, but anyways, do you know which one I'm talking about?
The were animals in the slasher films?
Yeah, no, they were actually making them, and then she had to Anita had to
Oh,
go and stop
yeah.
them. They were I can't remember what they're called. It'll come up with it. But how familiar are you with the Laurel K Hamilton Anita Blake series?
I'm pretty familiar with the world. I haven't gotten 8 or 9 books in. I've gotten the first 3 or 4 in, and I think they're so much fun. I love the twists and turns and
Yeah.
the different paranormal creatures colliding. I would have to say, in terms of my own writing, the similarity is most there in terms of the voice. So there's that dry humor. There's that snappy banner thing
Yep.
going on. Yeah, but Laurel K Hamilton, I love her stuff. She is one of my earlier inspirations, and I think that she really has such a gift for immersing the reader in her world. So I can only aspire to achieve that level of talent.
Yeah, I'm a vampire fan, and
Yeah.
I love the darker side of the immortality side of the vampires. I can't do the twilight sparkly in the sunlight unless you're Anne Rice's Lestat, who is
Yes.
drank the really old blood and can now be out there. Okay, I can get that, but snuff films are what I was talking about. Trying to think of. I guess one of the episodes is there are some weird animals that are involved
Yeah.
in that, and Anita and the gang have to go and stop it. Anyways, have you do you partake in Wicca, witchcraft, spell casting?
I've gotten more interested in that. I've been into crystals for a while. So Helen and I share that. I love crystals. I have a collection of them. So I do my little manifesting thing, and I've started studying astrology more and tarot. So I love oracle cards, and I've been learning more about that process. I got a deck of crystal-based oracle cards as a gift. So I started incorporating those too. But it's absolutely one of those things that is on my bucket list for this year to really delve more into. Especially tarot and astrology. I really want to enhance my knowledge around those two pursuits. But yeah, I've definitely dipped in a couple of toes, maybe the whole foot, but it's something I want to pursue more because I just find it's very fascinating, and the history of it and the cultures are so rich behind it. So I want to absolutely enhance myself there.
There's a small press here in New Hampshire that designed their own tarot cards that are meant to help writers in particular.
Oh, really?
I can't remember what they're called, but they are on our website. We do have them, so check them out. Go to our website and you'll see it on our browse page at the bottom, the tarot cards. But they're there to help you get like unstuck and just sort of a meditative whatever tarot cards do. But thought that might interest you.
Oh, nice. Definitely. Yeah, I could use that. Yeah, I'm always looking for any inspiration for writing, and anything that kind of connects those metaphysical elements to the writing process. I'm all about it.
Now, how much research did you have to do for how much spell casting is in there in your book, and did you have to do any Wicca research about spell casting and stuff?
I did. I read a lot. I remember a lot of the stuff that I read was really fascinating. Were a lot of texts that were coming out in the 1960s, like about color magic and kind of the history and the origins of Wicca, and especially and I was also reading a lot about chakras and the yogic, I know the Hindu, and those origins of the elements of magic that she draws from. So I was just reading a ton about all these different components. So like colors and drawing from the internal energy of the body, and how these concepts kind of play out in a number of different systems from Wicca and neo-paganism, but then also into Hinduism and Buddhism and Taoism, and how a number of those principles sort of show up in different formats. Yeah, so it was a fascinating research journey, and it's ongoing. So even though the book has been written, I'm still reading and still learning.
Yep. Yeah, don't worry, I'm still here. There we go.
Oh yeah.
I have problems with my camera every once in a while. So how did you come up with the title? I love the title, Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll.
Thank you.
And if you look at the title,
it was just one of those brainstorming things where I wanted something kind of clever and punny, to capture the whole thing. So, the hex and sex rhyme was right there. So, I couldn't resist. And then I went with that because I thought it really captured the themes in the story in that kind of nice, pithy title format. Yeah, so it was just a process of brainstorming, and I was bouncing ideas off with friends, just trying out different ones. I wanted something short and sweet, but also captured all the themes. And then that one just hit, and it was like my intuition was like, oh, that's it. That's the one. That's done.
Is there a little bit of rock and roll in the book?
Oh, there is. Yeah. That was another area that I had to do a ton of research from, that I really felt like I was coming from the ground up. Yeah, so Brian, the love interest, the male main character, he's a musician, kind of really like a legacy guitar player with a long history. He's been touring for a while, has multiple albums. So I really wanted to bring an authenticity with that element. So I was studying, guitars, like different kinds of notes, what's the difference between a D chord and a drop D and a C, learning all these things, and just the nitty gritty of how a tour functions and what the different people do on the road, and the role of a manager versus a producer. So yeah, that's one area where I was doing a deep dive. And then there's some stuff with like the stage being presented during a show where pyrotechnics are involved. So I had to learn how all that worked. Yeah, so at some point, the space in my head really felt tested, but it was really enriching getting all that out onto the page too.
Now, was that a lot of internet research, or did you use people who are familiar or in that type of work?
It was a little bit of both. Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to find some folks whose brains I could pick, who had been kind of on the periphery of that scene. And my husband has some experience, some background in music. So I was able to ask him some questions and get some referrals there. So yeah, it was a combination of talking to real people and then just reading, watching documentaries. I read a lot of biographies. So that was super interesting. read Dave Mussane's biography and Ace Frehley from Kiss, and just anybody I could get my hands on, and Steven Tyler and his biography. So, and anybody I could get my hands on that had written about just what the life is like, I delved in.
So it sounds like you're a rock and roller yourself.
I am, yeah, I'm very much a rock chick. You know, I was listening to some favorite tunes and to get ready for this interview, just like going into my space. Yeah, so I'm very much very much have a nostalgic place in my heart for the 80s rock songs, 80s and 90s.
Yep, same here. Hair bands are, especially hair bands for me.
Yes, absolutely.
So do you have a playlist that kind of goes along? That's one thing that I found, that a lot of authors have playlists that kind of go along with their books.
I do, yeah. It's sort of like an evolving, rotating playlist. So I haven't, made it in Spotify or Apple playlists or anything, or even written it down. But, I have like a number of core songs that I really associate with certain scenes in the novel. So some of them, like I drew direct inspiration from, and others just, it's more just like an impression or a feeling. Yeah, but there's like a rotation of songs that I would go through, when I was writing it or when I was researching it, that I would listen to, that would either help me visualize a scene or just help me, it sounds very woo-woo, but like just help me like feel my way through it. So yeah, I know music was a huge part of this, and like, I listen to those songs now, like, oh, I remember
the memories. Yes. Yep. Yeah. So do you listen to music while you're writing, or is that something that you use to maybe kind of clear your head if you get stuck?
I listen to music when I'm exercising, and that's about it. I go up. My little ritual is when I'm up at the gym on the treadmill. I'm just like actively searching for songs. Trying like digging into my unconscious, finding something I can listen to that'll help me, hopefully, visualize a scene or use as an inspiration. So I'll like go through my old favorites and then try to find something new. But no, when I actually write, it's total silence all the way. I can't have anything on in the background. I'm usually not too picky about most things, like format or where I'm sitting, or where I am in the in the space, but it's got to be silence. So no music during the actual process.
So one thing I learned going through the Pharaoh Feb and looking at their website when I began was, so there's obviously different subgenres within subgenres, and there's heat levels amongst, within the different books. So we have Lisa over on Facebook Live. She's asking, is there as much romance in the story as there is witchcraft? And then I'm going to add on to that, how much romance? Where's the heat level of the book?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I would say definitely, I would definitely classify it as a paranormal romance novel as opposed to an urban fantasy. So the romantic arc is central to the story and is interwoven at every level with the external plot elements. So I have heard some have classified it as a slow burn. So Brian and Helen meet right away, pretty close to right away. They meet right at the beginning of chapter 2, and then they have pretty steady, their attraction builds throughout. And, there's a couple of steamy scenes, one at 50% and one at about 75%. So yeah, there's definitely, I would say it's probably like on a scale of 1 to 5, heat level, it's either a 4 or a 5, but there's only 2 actually, fully developed sexy scenes like that. But yeah, it's definitely a romance in terms of like you see the romantic arc progressing from beginning to end, and then it ends with a happily ever after.
How about the witchcraft? Is there a real lot of witchcraft in it, or is it sort of?
I would say there's a good amount. With the witchcraft, it's very important. It's very central to Helen's character development as an individual. So as she goes through her journey with witchcraft and like dealing with her mentor and, learning her path and honing her skills, she's reading, she's researching, she's working with her crystals. So that becomes a big part of her individual arc. So yeah, I would say, it's not super detail oriented. So if you don't know a lot about witchcraft or magic or paganism, or whatever going in, that's fine. A reader's not going to be lost, I don't think, if they don't have a big background with that. But yeah, it's important to her personal journey because it becomes like symbolic in a way, thematically symbolic in terms of her growth arc.
So how many books are we looking at in the future?
We've got, book 2 of the Coven Daughter series comes out in August. of this year. And that features one of Brian's bandmates he's a secondary character in this, and he gets his own story in book 2. And the heroine is a mortician, which I'm just obsessed with it. I know I wrote it, I'm biased, but well, I don't want to spoil it, but there's a different supernatural component other than witchcraft that kind of, you alluded to it earlier, Chris, when you were talking about some of your fandoms and interests. So that'll be fun. And then there's actually going to be, after that, there's a total of 6 books in the Coven Daughters series. So those will be kind of steadily releasing throughout the next couple of years. And then the Jungle Shifters series, that ties in with this one as well. There's some character overlap in there. The first book of that's going to come out in 2023. So there's going to be a lot of books on the horizon. So hopefully folks will just dive right in with the series and stay with it.
So with the Under Your Skin, which is the first book in the Jungle Shifters series, I see book 1, in which a lonely wolf shifter in search of his pack and a math genius who harbors magical trade secrets in her DNA team up to thwart the dark plot against humanity and shifters alike, only to discover that falling in love may ruin their efforts. So how does that different? How does this new series, this new book, differ from the Coven Daughter series?
Well, that's going to be a shifter series. So we're kind of switching gears with the paranormal, except that Taylor, who is the heroine of Under Your Skin, she's part of the Coven Daughters prophecy too. So she's actually a witch who she doesn't come into. I don't want to spoil the book too much, but there's some tie-ins and some allusions. So she's got a little bit of that gift going on, but primarily in the Jungle Shifter series, starting with Under Your Skin, that's mostly focusing on wolf shifters and bear shifters, and there's some other animal shifters in the mix too. So we're really just kind of switching gears over to that other subgenre of paranormal there. So it's a little bit less on the witchcraft and a little bit more on the shifting, even though it is going to key in to the other series and kind of make references to it here and there.
Are we still going to get the heat level, 4 and 5 heat level in this?
Yeah. Yep.
Yep. So you just mentioned something. So somebody who sees your books for the first time, and let's say it's 2 years, we have to wait 2 years for this book, really?
Oh yeah, it'll be worth the wait though, I promise.
Okay.
I'm in love with the Jungle Shifters ones. You know, I love the Coven Daughters too. I love them all, but yeah, I think it's going to be great and really timely. I like to see it as kind of like a Black Mirror energy. If anybody has seen that show, there's definitely some vibes like that going. So it'll be worth the wait. Might even come out a little sooner. I mean, who knows? Release dates sometimes are a little bit fungible, but yeah, it'll be worth the wait.
Well, so it's a couple years now, and book 1 is out. So Under Your Skin is out. Will somebody have to read the Coven Daughters series, or at least Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll, before they read the new series, where you have a little crossover?
I wouldn't say you had to. No, I mean, everything I write is designed to be written as a standalone. So, I mean, you could even jump in at any point in the Coven Daughters series and start there. I would say, yeah, definitely read this one first. I think it's a good idea to be maximally familiar just with the world. And I think it'll be more fun that way if you start with Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. And then when Blood Sugar comes out in August, you'll start to sort of see some of the tie-ins. And then when you go forth with Under Your Skin and the Jungle Shifters books, you'll just start to see little allusions and references and hints of some of the world. So I think it's a good idea to start at the very, very beginning. But if for whatever reason you want to wait, start later, you can do that too, because they're all designed to be read as standalones.
So Laurel K Hamilton was an influence on Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. What about and other Darynda Jones and other writers? What were some of the other? Do you have other influences like movies or TV shows that kind of influence your work?
Yeah, in terms of theme and voice, so for a TV show, like my very first fandom ever was Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
I had a feeling.
Yeah, great. Yeah, so I comp my stuff, especially Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. I comp to Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just in terms of like that irreverent tone and the voice, and that kind of like it sucks to be the chosen one sort of thing, that Buffy has a little bit of that chip on her shoulder. So we get some of that energy in Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. So I bring that up. And then also True Blood and the Charlene Harris novels. There's some similarities there. Again, just in terms of the world, we've got like a fantasy world, a paranormal world, but that's existing in our real world. So, I mean, there's like shops and people ordering stuff off of Amazon and getting gas and just all the regular things that we go through. But then there's witches and shifters and casting spells and all that. So I feel like in terms of similarities, it's sort of similar to how the Earth Plus is built in something like True Blood. Yeah, so I love those. I also, in terms of paranormal romance, yeah, Darynda Jones was a big influence. So Last Grave on the Right and Left, the Charlie Davidson stuff. Was really, there's some similarities there with the humor. Jeffy Kennedy, just little of this, little of that. And then a lot of the folks who are putting stuff out for City Owl, I feel like there's really an affinity there with the voices, so Eden Butler, a lot of her stuff there's some synergy there, and Luna Joya. So just, I'm always just reading and seeing what's out there, but those would be some of the influences that I would say right off the bat.
How difficult was it to unless you did use some of the stereotypes? Did you try to stay away from like some of the stereotypes of witchcraft, or in the new books, the shifters, or do you use some of those tropes, I guess they're called?
Yeah, it's such a fine line with tropes. I would say that I'm faithful to tropes. Romance is built on tropes in a lot of ways. I have respect and fidelity to them, but I've always just had that little urge to take tropes and turn them on their head and kind of mix them up and mash them up. So they're always there, cognizant. I'm cognizant of them. They're in the back of my mind, and certainly there's a tropey element of it. tvtropes.com is one of my favorite websites. So I was using that a lot for research when I was referencing, like just to be aware, of all. It's like an encyclopedia for anyone who's not familiar. It's like an encyclopedia of like every trope ever that's been on TV. So that's really great. But yeah, I always have just had an urge to kind of mess them up a little bit and play with them, which is really fun.
Have you ever gone down one of those rabbit holes during your research and just kept going and going and going, and then realized, oh my goodness, it's been 2 or 3 hours, and because it's just been so fascinating? Or
oh yeah, and then I end up on the other side and I have no idea what I'm reading or watching and how I got there. I ended up watching this really wild movie called Suspiria. I watched both the original and the remake, because there's witches in it. I was like, well, I have to watch this. And somewhere along the line, I was like, what am I doing when I'm watching all this stuff? But yeah, that's part of the fun, is the research. But yeah, I feel like I'm in a research rabbit hole every day. And honestly, sometimes I'm not even sure what I'm researching. I'm just watching things and looking things up and reading things and banking it somewhere, consciously or subconsciously, for inspiration.
what's your favorite movie about witches, or witchcraft movie?
That's a tough question. Yeah, there's so many goodies. Hocus Pocus is a fun one. I loved practical. I loved practical magic, honestly, because you mentioned, stereotypes and getting away from them. I really liked that story because it kind of showed the realism of the sisters too, and it showed their lives as real people who were sort of touched with this fantastical element and how they navigated that balance. So I thought that was actually really charming, but also there was kind of a profound import underlying the charm that got me thinking of like, yeah, that would be that's really something to explore. There's a lot of depths to plumb there when thinking about a person who has these fantastical abilities but also has to maintain a real life. So yeah, that was a fun one. But then in terms of scary stuff, like scary witchcraft, honestly, Suspiria the remake is one of my favorite witch movies. Like, it's very dark, very creepy. But yeah, it really looks into like the dark magic on a really deep level and how it affects people. It's fiction, so how it affects the characters, but that was one of my favorites just in terms of how deeply it got on both the psychological and the metaphysical levels. So yeah, highly recommend.
Hocus Pocus is always on through the entire month of October in
Oh, yes.
this house when it's on the
Oh,
whatever it is, the
great.
Family Channel or whatever, and it's on
Yeah.
every other hour. So when did you start writing? What I mean, we know some of your influences, but when did you start writing, and when did those influences kind of kick in to write fantasy romance and paranormal romance?
Yeah. So in terms of fiction and creative writing, I was writing a little bit in college, but like I never really found my way. And then I had an academic career where I was writing a lot of, articles. I wrote a dissertation, and I came back to fiction just really kind of randomly in the tail end of 2015 is when I started fiction writing or creative writing again. And there was just something about like a confluence of all the factors in my life. I had moved to a new city, and I wasn't working full time at the time. So I had a lot of time on my hands. I was like delving deeply into yoga and working out, as a way to pass the time and just to focus on something and have a goal. And I just felt like a inspiration it just returned to me. So that's when I really got serious, and was really focusing on writing every day. And then I started to think about, sometime in 2016, 2017, like, oh, maybe I could actually figure out how to get something published and work toward that goal. So it's been really an incredible journey that's opened up in those past 5 or so years.
How long did it take you to write Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll?
It took me a while because I was such a newbie, a total novice at doing stuff like putting together a plot and a character arc. I mean, I was starting from the ground up. So I was, reading craft books and just really figuring out how to do it. So the writing that eventually turned into Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll was just the random free writing stuff that I started doing in November 2015, and the book got published finally in September 2020. So it probably took, I guess I would say it was done. So when I submitted it to City Owl, that would have been, August of 2019 when it was finally done, and wasn't doing anything else to it other than, the edits my editor gave back. So it took just under 4 years to write it. Cause I mean, I was rewriting it, I rewrote it probably 3 times, and I was revising and taking out scenes and doing all sorts of stuff to it. But from beginning to end, just under 4 years.
What about the follow-up books? Have you gotten faster in writing the books, or do
Yeah.
you still think you got a lot faster?
Yeah. Now that I kind of know what I'm doing, I say
Right,
kind of because
right.
I feel like I'm always learning. I never completely know what I'm doing. Nowadays, the stuff I'm drafting, I get through a first draft in maybe 3 to 4 months, and then I have to revise it. But that's about where I'm at now. 3 months to draft a book, and then another dedicated month or 2 to revision. So that's actually been a really nice payoff of feeling like starting to feel like I'm able to spare myself all those painful rewrites that I was having to do with this one. So it's been a learning curve, but it's been a good learning curve.
Now, are you a plotter or a pantser?
Oh gosh, I'm a total pantser. It's bad. I tried switching to plotting. I printed out a little outline, and I got a book on plotting, and I was like, I'm really gonna correct my course here. It was so cute. I was so dedicated, and it just failed miserably. So I just decided at that point, there's no fighting my nature on this. So I went back to the pant strategy. Doing it now, I'm writing a thriller, just kind of writing what comes to me every day that I sit down, and it's enjoyable. So it does mean more heavy revisions are going to be in store, but yeah, that's my process. And I think at this point, it's a never say never kind of thing in terms of if I'll change, but yeah, right now that's what's going on.
So let's talk about your process. So you sit down, and you mentioned that you like to have it quiet, and are there other rituals that you go through? What time of the do you sit down during a certain time of the day, in the morning, in the evening, or kind of when you get an idea? Do you get yourself a cup of coffee or a drink, or talk to your plants or something before you get started?
um Yeah, it's changed a little bit, you know. So now, you know, living the lockdown lifestyle with my son at home and everybody in the house, it has changed. So the funny thing is, I never used to be able to write at night. I just couldn't do it. My brain would shut down at 8 p.m. and I was just out. But what I used to do before, you know, all the changes took place, what I would carve out a couple of hours for myself in the day, and I'm fortunate enough that my job is flexible where I can do that, and I would go sit. And like there's a communal penthouse for our apartment building, so I would sit there, put my headphones in, I'd have a beverage, and I just like hammer out whatever I could in 2 hours. Now I'm writing at night more, so I'll wait until everybody else goes to bed. Usually I'll try to get some done between 10 and midnight. Yeah, so it's all just kind of been pushed later. So that's my process now. But I find that really satisfying. It's like the house is quiet and dark and I can just focus and tunnel in. And I like writing at home now as opposed to in another space. Just, you know, there's not as many spaces available to go to. So I've had to adapt, but it's been a good adaptation, just kind of finding that flexibility. But yeah, now it's a night owl thing
What
all
are
the
some of the
way.
what are some of the places that you used to go to, like libraries or coffee shops?
Yeah,
Or
I'd go to the library. Coffee shops, yeah, I would go to a coffee shop, go to the library. There was something about the background noise of other people that was kind of inspiring. So it's, even though like I can't listen to music and focus on that or have that in the background, like something about the chatter, the ambient chatter is like made it feel like a lively place, you know. So it
Yep.
got me going. But yeah, so I've had to sort of adapt some of those routines, but I like the solitude too. I do look out my window. I don't talk to the plants, but I'll look out my window. We're on the 14th floor. So I'll look out my window and just look at the city lights or the stars. Speak to me.
So when you're in the coffee shop and that chatter's kind of going on in the background, did you ever pick up on a conversation and eavesdrop because it was interesting? That would make a great section in this part right here.
Yeah. It sounds creepy, but I would do that all the time. What I would pick up were like little turns of phrase for dialogue. So, you know, nothing super specific as an example is coming to mind. I'll blurt it out if something comes back to me. But yeah, or sometimes it would just be like how a person was dressed or their hairstyle. And I would just sort of, if my mind was wandering, you know, I just people watch and look at somebody and think, you know, well, how would I describe that person's hair in an interesting way, or like the kind of bag they're carrying, you know? And I would come up with those little things and sometimes take notes, and I still do it because obviously, you know, we still encounter people. But yeah, it was a lot of drawing from everyday encounters, was drawing from everyday encounters for scene description and for dialogue.
So that was going to be my next question, was how did you develop your characters? Did you have an idea of what they looked like before you started writing? Was it a detailed image? Was it more of a vague image? Or now being at the coffee shops, like, ooh, I like her hair.
Yeah.
I like her face. So let's put her face with her hair. And I like his body type. But I like his clothes. You know, did you kind of put it together that way, or did you already have something in mind when you started?
I kind of had something in mind, you know. They kind of came to me already as fully formed people, but like in a really fuzzy, amorphous way. There were two instances that I could think of where I saw people in real life who looked like each of them, and I was just blown away. Actually, I think I saw two Helens in the wild, and I was just so like nerding out on my own writing and descriptions. I was like, I can't stare at these people and be weird, but like this matches my character in my head. How is this happening? And then I saw one for Brian driving too, and I was like, oh, do I follow him so I can get a better look? I didn't. I realized how creepy that sounds saying it out loud. But no, it was a very kind of strange, interesting phenomenon of, you know, seeing these people in real life who matched the idea I had for the characters in my head. But no, they were pretty just fully formed from my own visions, I guess. But I did use a website that I love called One Stop, and I used some suggestions to write a character Bible that came out of craft books. So I did have a process where I went through and I wrote out, you know, what does the person look like? You know, do they have any tics or quirks? You know, just this like series of questions that you would answer just to fill out like a profile of a person. So I did use some craft tools to help me put them together and form a clearer picture in my mind.
So did you so you say you're a pantser, and you take notes. Do you always carry around a notebook with you in case you see something like this? And
Oh yeah, I got one. So here's my little notebook. It's pretty ratty. I was going to show you something. So I had I have this whole thing, this little graphic. I don't know how well you can see it.
Oh yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, so that's like a representation of all the elements in the universe, in the Coven Daughters universe, and how they interact with each other. So that some of the world building things. So yeah, I always have a notebook on hand and I save them. They're gathering dust in my room. So I have a stack of maybe 7 or 8 that I've taken notes in throughout the years. Yeah, so it's a very nostalgic thing to have this physical piece to hang on to.
Now, is that a decomposition notebook?
It sure is.
We have those in the, yeah, those are great. We
Oh,
have those in the store.
yay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Your store looks really cool. I'd love to visit it
Thanks.
someday when we can travel
Yeah.
a little more freely.
Yeah, I'd love to have you in. So do you ever use like Scrivener or any of those to keep track, or do you just have like napkins and notes and sticky notes all over the place and just kind of move them around on the table?
Just the notebook. You know, I use that One Stop program. I loved that. I haven't gravitated back to a computer program or Scrivener. I sometimes will open a Microsoft Word document and do some plotting in there, but mostly it's just the notebook and then my noggin that I transfer onto the page. I guess I don't like to have too many things going, because then it gets kind of overwhelming of like, oh, what do I check? You know, is it in the notebook or is it in the Scrivener or the Word document or the compost Word document or whatever? So I try to limit it now just to notebook notes and then maybe like a separate Microsoft Word document for some plotting points.
Now, when you go to edit, do you go and write out a whole, like a paragraph, a chapter, or a whole big section, then go back and do it? Or do you kind of edit as you go?
I edit
It's
as I go. Yeah, so some advise against that, and you know, maybe I'll in retrospect see that as a bad habit to break. But I edit it so far. I think it works for me. So I'll do the drafting, and then when I go back to draft more, I'll start with editing the stuff that I already wrote the day before, and just try to catch any plot holes or bad sentences or whatever and fix those. I'm actually, for the first time ever, I'm working with one of my critique partners as I'm drafting. So I'm sending her chapters that are very rough as I go along. So that's been a really interesting new process. So now I'm taking in the input of another person and using that to fix as I edit as I go. But yeah, I edit as I go. And then when the book is finally done, I'll set it aside and not deal with it for a little while, for several weeks, and then go back to it and do a more comprehensive edit where I try to really, you know, fix plot problems or character inconsistencies and things like that.
So you did traditional publishing through City Owl Press for both of these series. Do you go through all the edits yourself, and then you have that person look at it before you send it to City Owl, or do you kind of do everything sort of simultaneously and let them do their editing part?
I have my critique partner and beta readers read it before I send it to my editor, just so it's the cleanest it can possibly be, you know. And then my editor will return the notes, her notes, and then I'll work with those and then turn it back in. But yeah, I want to get some eyes on it before I submit it. So like Under Your Skin, the latest one, I think that went to one critique partner and 2 beta readers. So I felt really confident when I was submitting that, like, you know, this is as good as it's going to be. And it's nice because I think that does help the edits be a little lighter when they come in from the press, you know, because the book's already been worked on quite a bit and revised substantially. So yeah, it's got a pre-editing process that it goes through before it goes to the press.
Do you have your husband? Does your husband help you in the editing, or do you use him as a beta reader, or does he just kind of let you do your thing?
You know, he no, not really. He did some brainstorming with me for Hex Love and Rock and Roll that I'm very grateful for. So he came up with some great ideas, bounced some ideas off, and he's read a few pages here and there, but mostly, you know, with the writing process, Mostly, you know, unless someone is like really involved with me, you know, and does their own writing as an editor, you know, I want them to read it once it's done so I can present this thing and be like, I made this. Isn't this cool? As opposed to, you know, getting in there when it's still really rough. So yeah, he's cheerleading from the sidelines and, you know, bouncing off ideas and whatnot, but he doesn't do the editing stuff.
So you went with, like I said, City Owl Press. City Owl Press is primarily a romance genre, sort of specialty indie press. Is that what drew you to submit to them, or did they come looking for you, or how did that whole come about?
You know, it was a little bit of both. I'd been drawn to them for a while. Just I had read some of their books and really enjoyed them, and I just felt like they would be a great fit for me in terms of the types of books they put out, their editing staff, you know, their covers. I love all their covers. So they've been on my radar for quite a while as like, and I was like, okay, when I'm ready, I'm definitely going to submit to them. And then there was some serendipity involved. So when I was shopping around Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll and the sequel, Blood Sugar, I was submitting them to Romance Writers of America chapter contests, both books. And then I also did a pitch contest on Twitter. And so Blood Sugar, the sequel, got noticed by the pitch contest on Twitter, and City Owl asked for the full manuscript. And then Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll got noticed from a Romance Writers of America contest, and a different editor from City Owl requested the full of that. So it ended up like both of those, long story short, both of those two books went into the pipeline. They got shopped around. They asked for a series proposal. I drew that up, and it all clicked. And yeah, I was very grateful for that. I was just very thrilled because I just kind of knew like, oh, this publishing house is going to be a great place for my voice and the style I write in. Yeah, so just they have really a talent for finding these kind of quirky, offbeat books, maybe stories that are a little bit different, that break the mold in some ways, cross genre, bend genre. So I just really saw myself as being part of their catalog and work toward that goal of getting my work in front of them. And I was very fortunate that the things landed as they did.
Like I said, we have one local author here, Sydney Ashcroft. Her book is Chasing Destiny, and that's in the store. And she went with City Owl Press, so that's how I found out
Nice.
about them. And then, and actually, I think that's how I found out about you. Is she sent out a blurb, I guess, through the City Owl Network or whatever, and then we got in touch to do this.
Right. That's right. That was through Facebook, I think. Yeah.
Yep. So what do you do in terms of, or what does City Owl do? Who has the most influence on the marketing, which must be really tough right now because of COVID? What were some of the things that you used to do for marketing? Conventions, meet and greets, things like that?
Yeah. You know, all that stuff went away just as I published. I'm so sad. So this summer, yeah, I mean, it's all digital now, and they do a great job. So they do a lot of, they're very engaged with social media. So City Owl does a ton of promotion on social media. They're very cross-platform. So they've got like Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. They're doing some cool stuff on Pinterest with posting pictures and then quotes from the books. You know, before the COVID situation, the press had a really strong presence at the Romance Writers of America national convention. So I went to that convention before I was published. I went there in the summer of 2019, and there were several City Owl authors there. So there was like a big conference room that was the booksellers room, and you know, they had a table set up with a banner, and there were beautiful banners in the hallway, and the authors were milling about. So it was a Q&A, you know, so you'd set up with your books and people would come by and talk to you, and people had, you know, the authors had swag like bookmarks and pins and stuff like that. So there was a really strong reader engagement presence through the convention. So I hope that comes back because it was really fun. And, you know, I was like an aspiring author / reader when I went to the last one of those, but it was really fun to just collect the goodies and interact with people and meet authors. And yeah, so I'm ready for that to come back.
Yeah, that's one thing we miss around here. We have a couple big conventions from a small presses down in Massachusetts, and I miss going to those and meeting the new authors to see what we can get for the store and stuff. What kind of do you have any swag, like bookmarks or pens or things like that are just sort of sitting in a pile waiting to get to people?
I need to make them. I feel like I mean, the only thing I have is I made a mask. I didn't make the mask, but I went to a website where you can like upload your graphic onto a mask. So I have a face mask that has the picture of my book cover on my face. I have that, but that's just one for me. I haven't made any like pens or anything like that to send out, but I know I need to. And actually, a reader reached out to me and was like, "Do you have any swag? Where is it?" And I was like, "Oh gosh, I'm sorry, I'm dropping the ball here." So that's something I need to do and want to do. It's one of my hashtag goals is to make some cool swag because it's fun, and people love it.
Yeah, well, let me know when you do, and if you can send us some to go along with your books.
I sure will.
Book plates, if you want to sign some book plates and send them on, we can stick them in the books and stuff too. There was one author that we have here in New Hampshire who would take a couple copies of her books, especially if she went to different airports, because she used to travel all around the country and to London and back a couple times a year, and she'd leave her books with a bookmark and her business card at the terminal. And then get on the plane and leave it for, she'd write a little note in it too. So yeah, it's kind of creative. People, I find different creativity for marketing is how important is a website. You have your website here, which is catturnerauthor.com. Yes. It's kind of like your book cover. It's got those blues and purples and pinks and stuff. It's very colorful. How important is having a website, the social media?
I think it's important, and there's differing opinions on this. What I will say is it's worked pretty well for me. I've met so many wonderful people from social media. The website's a little harder to gauge. What I will say with the website, I think it's important to have that landing page, and then especially as a home base for newsletter signups. So I've had some small successes as a result of having a newsletter, promoting Hex when it was in the Swoonies contest, to drum up votes for that. So the newsletter was a big part of that. So I think having a website is super important, particularly to give people a designated space to sign up for your newsletter. And I'll say with social media too, I mean, it's so hard to say what drives sales, what moves the needle. And I don't let myself like go into Amazon and, check my sales and like monitor when it's bouncing or whatever. So it's too much. But what I will say with social media is I've met so many fantastic people through Twitter and Facebook, and it's a great way to connect and to promote events like this, and to spread the word when new books are coming out. Covers, social media is great for sharing any visual material. So in my experience, it's been important, and it's been a pretty central process of my brand and promotion. Yeah.
So we're almost coming up to the end of time. It's about 5 minutes of, so just let me know when we need to stop. We do need to cut it a little early because that's why Kat's sitting in her car. Her son is at an event himself, and so she's waiting for him. Yeah. So we are going to stop in probably about 5-10 minutes or so, 8 minutes or so. So what about audiobooks? Are your books in audiobook format, or have you ever thought of that? Has City Owl mentioned anything about that?
Oh, I'd love that. Yeah, that would be great. I know that they are doing audiobooks now. So another City Owl author recently had one of her stories. She sold the audio rights to it. So it's going to be an audiobook format. Yeah, I think that'd be great. I think that this book, I think Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll would be really conducive to the audiobook format. And like Brian has a British accent, right? So that'd be super fun to listen to in an audiobook. And then some of the music, I think would translate really well. So I love audiobooks, and I think they're a great alternative to read in just different spaces. So if you have a commute, I know we're not commuting as much anymore, but for going on walks, like I love to listen to audiobooks when I'm out for walks. I have a loop I do, and I'll just put an audiobook on. So yeah, I would love if this one made its way into the audiobook sphere. I think that'd be really cool. I just go right in and listen to it right away.
So it sounds like you would rather have somebody else read it than you read it?
Yeah, I'd rather have somebody else read it. I don't know. I think it'd be too awkward listening to my own voice, read my own book for however many hours. I know that's a thing. I'm not sure if that would work for me. I would enjoy the novelty of a different narrator or narrators. Yeah.
Well, that's another thing too, because you mentioned the British accent with your male character. Would you want to have at least two, one female, one male, or would you rather have it all one and have them either just read it straight, if it's just a single person, read it straight, or have kind of different voices for each of the characters?
My preference, if I was picking here, I would say I would prefer two different people to do the two different characters, kind of for that more authentic effect. But I'm not picky, and I think that some audiobook narrators are so talented at modulating their voices that I can absolutely suspend my disbelief. I listened to one a while back, and it was the same narrator who was doing all the characters, and after not too long in the book, I forgot that it was one person doing all of that, because she was so adept at changing her pitch and her tone and her rate and her inflection. I mean, it was an art and a talent in and of itself. So yeah, I'm not, either way would be great.
Well, we do partner with an audiobook company called Libro FM.
Ooh.
And they support local bookstores by remitting a good percentage of the sale of their books and their memberships to us. And you can get to their link through our website, it's libro.fm.
Okay.
So just something to keep in mind.
You bet.
See if mention it to City Owl, because there is one thing that I know everybody goes to, that the Evil River, as we call them, that online major discount book selling website that shall not be named.
Yes, right.
Anyways, no. So they have, I guess, a feature where you have to stay with them exclusively for so much time, and so I can't advertise you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
As to where
yeah.
you throw it on Libro, I'm going to promote it all day. We just had one author who just came off of that exclusivity contract or whatever it is, clause, and so now she's put her books up on her audio books up on Libro, and so I'm promoting the heck out of them. Alana Mugden, the Dragon Speakers, her first book. That's the one that's in audiobook right now. But anyways, so if you could have any voice character, either from an audiobook that you listened to and you really like their voices, or TV movie star, who would you like to narrate your characters?
Oh boy. That is a question. Gosh. I you know, just the names that are popping into my head, it's because I visualize these people because I've totally done this. I've visualized these people acting as the characters in a movie or TV show. So I'm just thinking of their voices and matching, voice to face. But for, they're both celebrities. So I think of Jennifer Lawrence, and I think of her voice and her acting out, her doing the voice of Helen in the audiobook, and how cool that would be. And for Brian, I think of Michael Fassbender. He's the actor that I picture playing him, and once this is a movie, putting that out into the universe for manifestation purposes. But yeah. But again, hey, I'm not picky. I think there's so many talented folks out there. I'd love to hear this. I'm all in.
Well, on the big screen, that was on film. That was going to be my next question. But first, just kind of looking at your cover real quick, she kind of looks like she has a Jennifer Love Hewitt look to her.
Oh yeah, I can see that. Yeah, Jennifer, if you're listening, we'd love to have you.
Yeah. She's
even Megan Fox a little bit.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, well, a combination of the two there. And Jennifer Love Hewitt, she was in that Ghost series, Ghost Whisperer.
That's right.
She's got that paranormal, background to her. So you kind of partly answered the next question. So you obviously would love to see it on the screen. What kind of screen would you like to see? A big screen, a multiple series, like Star Wars epic series, or would you rather see it on a Hulu type thing, like a Handmaid's Tale, just multiple, something like that, or just a one-time 2-hour TV movie?
I'm gravitating towards the series a little bit, Chris. I think it'd be perfect for Netflix or a Netflix series. But again, I would not say no to any option here, really, at this point. So a movie sounds cool, but I picture it more as a series, because I think that would have more opportunity to delve into the different characters and their dynamics and all the different plot lines. So I'm seeing like 5 seasons on Netflix or something like that. That would be my dream. That's my ideal vision.
How much hands-on would you want to be?
Oh, I'd love to be a producer of it. Oh yeah, I want to be there in my little chair, with the cloth backing. Yeah.
The big catering spread and everything. And
yes, exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, it's 8 o'clock. Did you want to go a couple more minutes, or?
I think I better sign off and
all right.
Go do the tend to my other obligation here, but it's been really fantastic. I enjoyed this. It's been a lot of fun. I really appreciate you having me on.
Great. Well, yeah. Well, thank you very much too. So, Kat Turner, Hex, Love, and Rock and Roll. That's out now. You can get that through our websites, our in store, and or bookshop.org. That's another one that helps support us. And we'll be looking for the audio books, and I'm sure it's on ebook. Hummingbird Digital Media is a great place for ebooks. They again support us. And so that does it for our Pharaoh Feb. Kat, thank you for being our final person. This was been fun.
Oh, my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much, Chris.
And thank you for everybody who is on Facebook listening. And this will be available to watch and download, or to watch on our Facebook page. So looking forward to meeting you someday.
You bet. I would love that. Yeah, we'll keep in touch.
Yes. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you.